Ever wondered what disturbing moments stay hidden behind the curtains? From mysterious deaths to accidents on set, some of these cases have become part of Hollywood lore. Here are 10 eerie behind-the-scenes moments from old Hollywood history. Number 10. The Superman Curse. Ever heard of the Superman Curse? This refers to a series of supposedly related misfortunes that have plagued some creative people behind the film adaptations of the DC Comics character Superman. This wasn't restricted to one media alone. Both on film and television, did you know that actors who have played the role of Superman have met mysterious circumstances? Lee Quigley played the infant Superman in the 1978 film. He was born into an unstable home and also suffered schoolyard bullying. The young star tragically died in 1991 at age 14 from inhalant abuse. Take Kirk Alyn, too. Alyn played Superman in 2 low-budget 1940s serials. Unfortunately, he was unable to find work afterwards due to typecasting. This meant that he was relegated to voice roles, commercials, and uncredited screen roles. Alyn later died of Alzheimer's disease. Next, let us turn to George Reeves, as the curse is frequently associated with him. George Reeves starred in Adventures of Superman on television from 1952 to 1958. He died in 1959 of a self-inflicted gunshot wound just at the peak of his career. He was 45 years old. This, of course, is the abridged version. George Reeves played Superman in the 1951 film Superman and the Mole Men and the ensuing television series of Adventures of Superman. Like Alyn, he had been typecast. He was just too closely associated with the role to find further work. On June 16, 1959, days before he was to be married, Reeves was found dead of a gunshot wound at his home with his Luger pistol near him. The death was ruled a suicide. There were reports that he had been depressed about the inability to secure other roles. Still, there was controversy surrounding his death. For one, Reeves' fingerprints were never found on the gun, and he had also reportedly been having an affair with the wife of MGM exec Eddie Mannix. Like we said earlier, it was Reeves' death that truly inspired the conspiracy theories and the urban legend of a curse associated with the character. After his death, people began to really speculate and draw comparisons to the tragic fates of others who have had connections to the Superman films. There was also Christopher Reeve. Christopher Reeve played Clark Kent/Superman in the 1978 through 87 Superman film series. First was Superman the Movie in 1978, Superman 2 in 1980, Superman 3 in 1983, and Superman 4 The Quest for Peace in 1987. Subsequently, he was subject to typecasting and found difficulty acquiring other roles. Hollywood had relegated him to Superman sequels and supporting roles. Reeve was paralyzed from the neck down after being thrown from his horse in a cross-country equestrian riding event on May 27, 1995. A full-on tragedy, wouldn't you say? Sadly, he died on October 10, 2004, 15 days after his 52nd birthday. No official autopsy was performed, but both Reeves' wife, Dana, and his doctor, John McDonald, believed that an adverse reaction to a drug caused Reeves' death. Some prefer to see this as an unfortunate coincidence. Looking at it logically, it appears to be just a number of significant misfortunes that inevitably occurred, as they would have in any substantial sampling of random individuals. But majority have since tagged it a curse, one that is often invoked whenever misfortune is experienced by actors and other personnel who work on Superman adaptations. In fact, this notion is so revered that some talent agents cite the curse as a big reason why it is always difficult to cast actors in the roles in live-action feature films.
Well, it's delicious.
Number 9. The Dracula Obsession. At this point, it is pretty common knowledge that Bela Lugosi came to regret playing the role of Dracula. Because of his performance as Count Dracula, the Hungarian-American actor unintentionally defined his career and created an identity that followed him for the rest of his life and even in death. Born Bela Ferenc Deso Blasco in Hungary, Bela Lugosi had acted on stage in Europe before coming to America in the 1920s. He was also a stage actor in Hungary, where he warranted himself as a classical actor that always portrayed Shakespeare characters. Nevertheless, when Lugosi came to America, he had a tough time getting meaty roles because of his heavy accent and rudimentary command of English. Then came the decisive event in Lugosi's life. Sometime in 1927, he received the role of Count Dracula in the stage production based on Bram Stoker's Dracula. The man became an overnight star on the stage after mimicking the Transylvanian Empire. With the mesmerizing eyes, an air of sophistication, and an English accent, his outstanding performance as the titular character struck the viewers and the critics. He was later cast as the protagonist in the 1931 Universal Pictures horror film Dracula by director Todd Browning. This role would mark Lugosi as a significant figure in Hollywood history. Lugosi's portrayal of the vampire was memorable, to say the least. What he did was establish one of the most memorable depictions of the vampire, which to this day forms the basis of most depictions of vampires in fiction. People began associating the heavy accent, slicked back hair, and cruel cape with the vampire, and Lugosi's Dracula set the benchmark for all subsequent vampires to be compared with. However, this success of Dracula will not come without drawbacks. Lugosi was soon restricted to typecasting as a horror actor. Even though he wanted to work in a diverse range of occupations, Hollywood production companies continued to cast him in similar horror roles. As you can imagine, this typecasting restricted the kinds of scripts that were assigned to him and, therefore, the way he could have developed into more of a versatile actor. Even worse, Lugosi's popularity faded over the years, and he was left with little money for his name. Most of the parts that he played were in independent or low-budget flicks, which were even B-movies, often by unknown production houses. With no clear way of making a living anymore, Lugosi developed some personal problems with substance abuse. One instance is how he developed a morphine addiction. This addiction, in conjunction with the typecasting that he was put in, hindered his progress and led to his deterioration. By the middle of the 50s, Lugosi's career had deteriorated so badly that he was working with director Ed Wood and appeared in B-movies and films that are considered to be the worst in history. While the later years of Bela Lugosi were somewhat tumultuous, his link to Dracula remains an inseparable part of the horror film history. Unfortunately, this horror story played out in his life as well. Dracula impacted generations of directors, actors, and writers, defining how vampires are depicted in the cinema and in the books. This has exemplified the extent of identification. Lugosi could not escape the identification with this character that he was even buried in his Dracula cape when he died in 1956. Tragic that he immortalized himself as a film legend while also falling prey to his own success.
Grandfather, there's something I've got to tell you. Please don't be angry with me. But I can't marry Carlos.
Go on.
I know it's a great
Number 8. Mysterious Death of Carole Lombard. Hollywood icon and wife of actor Clark Gable, Carole Lombard had it all until her tragic death on January 16, 1942. She died in a plane crash. You might already be wondering what is so mysterious about it. Well, the truth is her death turned out to be just as mysterious as it was shocking. We mean there are several unusual circumstances and conspiracy theories that have risen over the years, and all these theories suggest that there was more to the plane crash. To uncover this mystery, let's begin with the actual event. You see, Lombard was flying home from a war bond tour in Indianapolis when the TWA DC-3 plane crashed into Potosi Mountain near Las Vegas, Nevada. Carole and 21 other people on board all lost their lives. Among them were Lombard, her mother, and MGM press agent Otto Winkler. So, what caused the crash? Turns out that it was the cause of a pilot error. This investigative report was determined by the Civil Aeronautics Board investigation. Their investigation led them to believe that the plane had been flying at an altitude below what was safe for the mountainous terrain. But just how likely is it that the pilot failed to adhere to the correct course? Did he have a death wish, or was something else at play? One must also consider the World War II context of the crash. This was January 1942. Notably, it was around the time that the United States had just entered World War II. As you can imagine, this seemingly inconsequential factor turned out to be the cause of further suspicions. One of the most sold being that the crash was a result of potential sabotage by Axis forces. To be fair, Lombard had been outspoken in her support for the war effort and had even raised $2 million in war bonds during her tour. So thinking she was a threat to the opposition might not have been too far-fetched. If it wasn't for the Axis forces, then there were also rumors that the crash might have been a deliberate act of sabotage by Nazi sympathizers or agents, all still pointing to the possibility that her involvement in the war effort got her killed. Even after FBI investigations found no evidence of foul play, the rumors still persisted. We also can't forget the supernatural and psychic elements at play. There are stories that Lombard herself had bad feelings about flying. All her life, she preferred traveling by train. How tragic is it that one of the few times she opted for a plane was the worst decision she ever made? At that particular time, she reportedly wanted to return home to Los Angeles as quickly as possible. Because of this, she ignored her instincts. But her instincts weren't the only thing she ignored. Some accounts claim that her mother, Elizabeth Peters, had consulted a psychic shortly before their flight. The psychic warned her of impending danger, but despite the warnings, they boarded the plane.
You'll learn when you're older, Jim.
Well, I don't think that I want to learn that way.
Well, it doesn't matter anyway because we're moving.
I'm not terrible.
Number 7. The Curse of Rebel Without a Cause. The 1950s is one of the most remarkable periods in the history of American cinema. This era saw the rise of many new movie stars. One of them is James Dean, who, despite his short life, became a true icon for actors and movie lovers. Some would argue that it was James Dean's portrayal of the rebellious teenager Jim Stark in the film that solidified its position as a classic in Hollywood history. Now, we all know that movie fans tend to create various conspiracy theories about their favorite actors or writers. That said, there are numerous theories about Hollywood curses. Did you think the Superman curse was the only one? Well, you thought wrong. Rebel Without a Cause is the kind of movie in which some fans still believe a curse surrounds it. And just like the Superman curse, the reason is simple. The lives of all three main characters in the movie ended prematurely and quite tragically. As we mentioned earlier, James Dean was the main star of the film, but he died in a car accident a month before its release. A young and promising star died at the height of his career, and this accident is still considered one of the most tragic stories in Hollywood history. Interestingly, shortly after Dean's death, a theory emerged that the car Dean was driving was cursed. Dean had named his Porsche Little Bastard. This was a luxury car that was bought just a week before his death. Rumor has it that Dean had an eerie encounter with actor Alec Guinness shortly before he passed. When Guinness saw the car, he told Dean that if he continued to drive it, he would soon meet his demise. Unfortunately, Dean took Guinness's words as a joke, but those words proved true, and Dean was killed in a traffic accident a week after this meeting. And it wasn't just James Dean. The reasons behind the deaths of the other two actors in the film, Sal Mineo and Natalie Wood, are also shrouded in mystery. Sal Mineo was a good friend of James Dean. After Dean passed, he appeared in several films and TV series. While returning home from the studio after working on his final role, the actor was stabbed by an unknown person near his car. Neighbors tried to help Sal Mineo, but it was too late. This brings us to the third case. The death of Natalie Wood was just as enigmatic. To date, it has not been entirely determined whether the actor died by suicide, was murdered, or was an accident. On the night of her death, Wood was on a yacht with her husband, Robert Wagner, and friend, Christopher Walken. Everything was going perfectly until they realized that she had disappeared. A short time later, Wood's body was found off the coast of Santa Catalina. It is worth noting that Wood did not know how to swim, which rules out the idea that she went into the water of her own volition. Natalie Wood's case is indeed very complicated, and to this day, what transpired that night remains a significant mystery. The tragic fate of the actors involved in Rebel Without a Cause has added an aura of mystery and fascination to the film, cementing its status as one of the greatest films ever made about teenagers.
Are you ready now?
Yes. Say goodbye, Toto. Yes,
Number 6. The horrors on the set of The Wizard of Oz. Yes, the classic 1939 film makes this list. The making of The Wizard of Oz has become notorious for the troubling events and accidents that took place behind the scenes. Though the film is a classic, the stories of what occurred during its production reveal an eerie element at play, and also how difficult and dangerous the working conditions in Hollywood at the time could be. Let's begin with Margaret Hamilton. She played the Wicked Witch of the West. Hamilton suffered serious burns during a scene where she disappears in a cloud of smoke and fire. What are the odds that the trapdoor mechanism failed to operate correctly? As a result of this failure, she was exposed to the flames. She was left with second and third degree burns on her face and hands. Hamilton had to take several weeks off to recover, and she was left with permanent scars. Buddy Ebsen, who was originally cast as the Tin Man, was also hospitalized due to filming. He had experienced a severe allergic reaction to the aluminum dust used in his character's makeup. The dust entered his lungs and caused life-threatening breathing problems. Ebsen had to leave the production, and he was replaced by Jack Haley, who wore a different, safer makeup made of aluminum paste. However, even Haley had an eye infection from the makeup. In general, many of the actors were put at risk during filming. The flying monkeys, who were suspended on wires, were at risk because it malfunctioned at times and led to injuries for the stunt actors. The heavy costumes worn by many of the cast members were also a problem. Consider the Cowardly Lion suit. It was made of real lion pelts, which made it difficult for the actor to move or breathe, especially under the intense studio lights. In the famous poppy field scene, the filmmakers used asbestos-based snow to create the illusion of snowfall. To be fair, the dangers of asbestos were not yet known at the time, so the actors and crew were unknowingly exposed to hazardous materials. Thankfully, we now know that prolonged exposure can lead to serious respiratory diseases, including cancer. Sad that after enduring such long hours, these actors were left with lasting scars. The combination of dangerous stunts, poor safety protocols, and the mistreatment of cast members contributed to the dark and eerie legacy of The Wizard of Oz's production. Hard to imagine that the magical and whimsical on-screen presentation hides a troubling behind-the-scenes history. This sharp contrast makes it one of the most famous examples of the often harsh realities of old Hollywood filmmaking. Number 5. The mysterious death of Thomas Ince. Thomas Ince was born into a showbiz family in Newport, Rhode Island. As the story goes, he initially pursued a career as an actor, but would ultimately shift to filmmaking after facing numerous setbacks on stage. When it comes to filmmaking, Ince was one of the best, ultimately earning himself the moniker Father of the Western Style. You can agree that Thomas Ince isn't as well known as some Hollywood figures, but he was a significant pioneer behind the scenes. He established one of the earliest standard movie studios, the very one that would eventually evolve into MGM Studios. However, Thomas Ince faced financial troubles, the kind he could not hide as he was teetering on the brink of bankruptcy sometime in 1942. Interestingly, Thomas endeavored not to let his financial troubles weigh heavily on him, so he sought solace in activities that brought him joy, and one of those things was a lavish 42nd birthday party. His close friend, William Randolph Hearst, enthusiastically supported the idea. He even suggested that they use Thomas's boat as the venue. Everything seemed perfect until the celebrant wound up dead. So what happened on that boat? Drinks flowed, food abounded, and the atmosphere brimmed with merriment. Now, according to some accounts, Thomas suffered from severe indigestion, the kind that prompted an urgent stop in Los Angeles for medical attention. Although examined by a doctor and subsequently sent home, Thomas's condition rapidly deteriorated. Sadly, it all culminated in his sudden passing the next day. Now, the official cause of death may have been attributed to heart failure, but rumors would soon begin to circulate, and these rumors suggested a more sinister explanation. Was it really a heart failure? You see, speculation swirled that Thomas met his demise not from indigestion or heart failure, but from a gunshot wound. Isn't that a shocking twist? You can just imagine the papers having a field day with this one. But why would there even be a gunshot? According to the rumors, his friend Hearst had discovered Charlie Chaplin in a compromising situation with his mistress, Marion Davies. He was said to have reacted in a jealous frenzy that resulted in a fatal misfire. What are the odds that he was aiming for Chaplin and would rather hit his friend, Thomas? However, the truth remains shrouded in uncertainty. From Thomas's swift cremation to the subsequent contract awarded to a supposed eyewitness, the circumstances surrounding Thomas's death appear meticulously orchestrated. Or was it all a mere coincidence? Nobody can say for sure. Number 4. The Twilight Zone movie disaster. The Twilight Zone movie disaster refers to a tragic incident that occurred during the filming of Twilight Zone the movie. It was the 23rd of July, 1982, and 3 cast members lost their lives. The film was an anthology directed by several well-known filmmakers, including John Landis, Steven Spielberg, Joe Dante, and George Miller. Notably, the disaster in question took place during the filming of a segment directed by John Landis. The victims were actor Vic Morrow and 2 child actors, 7-year-old Micah Din Lee and 6-year-old Renee Shin-Yi Chen. All 3 were involved in a Vietnam War-era scene. This scene was set in a village during a U.S. helicopter attack, and Morrow's character was supposed to rescue the children while the village was under attack by American forces. During filming, a helicopter was being used to create realistic, warlike scenes with explosions going off around the actors. However, one of the explosions occurred too close to the helicopter. It damaged the rotor blades and the helicopter lost control. The subsequent crash killed Vic Morrow and the 2 children instantly. Morrow and one of the children were decapitated by the rotor blades, and the other child was crushed by the helicopter. It was an all-round tragedy. The 2 child actors were not only hired illegally, but they were also working late at night and without the proper permits and safeguards required by child labor laws. It is haunting to think that stunt safety was not even a priority. The scene was obviously too dangerous, especially given the proximity of the actors to the helicopter and explosives. The film was completed and released in 1983, but the tragedy no doubt cast a shadow over its release. The movie's box office performance was moderate, but it was forever tainted by the accident. If you made it this far, do hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any updates from us. Number 3. The mysterious death of Paul Byrne. This particular case will forever go down in history as one of the most elusive mysteries of Hollywood. It involved the iconic Jean Harlow, her deceased husband Paul Byrne, and another woman whose body was discovered not too far away. Paul Byrne was a 40-year-old German film executive affiliated with MGM. Despite his unassuming demeanor, he possessed influential connections in Hollywood. He first crossed paths with Jean Harlow when she was 22 years old. At the time, she was already a shining light in the film industry. It certainly helped that she had the platinum blonde locks, the enticing curves, and the provocative allure. Soon as he met her, he spotted her potential as a serious actress and was bent on taking her even higher. So, following a brief courtship, the pair wed in July of 1932. But 2 months later, there would be a tragic loss. Byrne took his own life with a gunshot wound to the head. Isn't it weird that when Byrne's lifeless body was discovered, the household staff's initial response was not to alert the authorities? Their first course of action was to notify MGM. Rumor has it that the studio promptly dispatched its top operatives. They meticulously surveyed the scene for 2 hours before finally involving law enforcement. Notably, Harlow was informed of her husband's demise as she had spent the night at her mother's residence. Now this was when things got weird. As MGM was busy shaping the narrative to protect its image, law enforcement officials rightly embarked on a quest for tangible evidence. Before long, authorities discovered peculiar details in Paul Byrne's personal history. It turns out that Byrne was still legally wedded to his first wife, Dorothy Millette. But while they were uncovering this, another tragic incident was taking place. Upon learning of Byrne's demise, Dorothy Millette promptly vacated the Plaza Hotel in San Francisco. Settling her bills after a 4-month stay, she secured passage on the Delta King riverboat. 2 hours later, a night watchman making his rounds stumbled upon a woman's coat and shoes left abandoned on the deck. Upon docking in the morning, Millette was nowhere to be found. The Delta King staff initiated a search for her. Millette was found, but she wasn't found alive. A tragic tale indeed, but the sheer mystery of it made for a grand spectacle. Was there a connection between the two deaths? Nobody could say. Number 2. The Poltergeist Curse. Yes, another cursed film takes a spot on this list. The so-called curse of the Poltergeist film refers to a series of tragic and unusual events involving the cast and crew of the Poltergeist trilogy. Just like the others, much of the lore around the curse stems from coincidence, but there is just something eerie about the deaths and strange occurrences that followed the films. Where do we even begin? First up would be Dominique Dunne. Dominique played the eldest daughter, Dana Freeling, in the original Poltergeist film, but she was murdered shortly after the film's release in 1982. Her ex-boyfriend, John Thomas Sweeney, strangled her in the driveway of her home. She fell into a coma and died 5 days later at the age of 22. This event, just months after the film's release, was the first to fuel rumors of a curse. There was also Heather O'Rourke. The child actress portrayed Carol Ann Freeling, none other than the iconic figure of the Poltergeist trilogy. She too tragically died at the age of 12 in 1988. Initially misdiagnosed with Crohn's disease, Heather ultimately suffered from an acute bowel obstruction that led to septic shock and cardiac arrest during surgery. She died 4 months before the release of Poltergeist 3. Julian Beck, who portrayed the malevolent spirit Kane in Poltergeist 2, died at the age of 60 from stomach cancer in 1985. This was just before the film's release. 2 years later, Will Sampson, who played the Native American shaman Taylor in Poltergeist 2, died as well. He underwent a heart and lung transplant, but complications from surgery led to his death at the age of 53. One big rumor was that Sampson reportedly performed a cleansing ritual on the set of Poltergeist 2. He had done this to alleviate the supernatural energy he felt while working on the project. Could there really have been a supernatural force at play? While we can't say for sure, we do know that there were several factors that fueled the belief in a curse surrounding the Poltergeist series. One of the most prominent elements of the cursed lore involves a claim that real human skeletons were used as props during the filming of the original Poltergeist in 1982. Many believe that using real skeletons could have disturbed spirits and contributed to the tragedies that followed. The supernatural themes of hauntings, restless spirits, and malevolent supernatural forces all created an eerie atmosphere that heightened the tension around the bizarre and untimely deaths.
Steve? Oh, Steve! Trying to break up.
Number 1. The mysterious death of Thelma Todd. For this one, we will take it back to the morning of Monday, December 16, 1935. The body of a young woman was found doubled over on the front seat of her chocolate brown 1934 Lincoln Phaeton. This convertible was parked in a garage in Pacific Palisades. The woman inside was wearing diamond jewelry and dressed in a mauve and silver evening gown and a mink coat. By all indications, she had seemingly died of carbon monoxide poisoning. The skin on her face was also red with coagulated blood because she had struck her head on the steering wheel of her car as she died. Now, this woman was actress Thelma Todd. As you can imagine, this was a big deal. She was one of the biggest stars in Hollywood at the time, and she was only 29. There were so many eerie things about this unfortunate incident. For one, the garage where her car was parked belonged to the house of her on-and-off lover, director Roland West. To make things even more complicated, West's estranged wife, Jewel Carmen, who was a silent movie star, was also living there at the time. As you can already tell, this has the makings of a mystery, and Todd's death is truly one of the enduring mysteries of Hollywood. Her death created a frenzy in the media with daily headlines throughout the police investigation. Some facts were attested to by witnesses, but a lot of the story is still unknown, mostly due to the fact that the gaps were filled in with conspiracy theories and conjecture. According to police records, Todd had gone to the Trocadero nightclub on Sunset Boulevard on Saturday night for a party hosted in her honor. Apparently, she got into an altercation with her ex-husband, Pat DeChico, but she was in good spirits and was dropped home by her chauffeur just before 4 a.m. in the morning. The chauffeur testified that he dropped her off at the foot of the stairs on PCH that led up to her apartment. The theory goes that Todd found out that she was locked out of her home and decided to climb 270 stairs up the hill to access the garage where the chauffeur parked her car and spend the night sheltering in it. She turned on the ignition of the car to stay warm and might not have been sober enough to remember the dangers of carbon monoxide poisoning. At first, the police rushed to judgment, calling her death a suicide. But when more than 100 gift-wrapped Christmas presents were found in her apartment, it pointed them in the direction that she might not have been suicidal after all. The cause was then changed to accidental death, and it was a decision agreed to by a grand jury. While it is a working theory, it was never accepted for several reasons. To this day, many still believe that Todd was, in fact, murdered. Let's go over the damning facts. One of the things that could not be explained was the autopsy report. It proved that she had throat damage, the kind that could have been caused by the forcing of a hose into her mouth, as well as a broken nose and 2 cracked ribs. Another thing was that the ignition was on in the car when Todd's body was found. Todd was found a day after she died, so how likely is it that the fuel in the tank had not been drained by the time she was found? Also, Todd's mother told the police of her daughter's weak heart, so it was unlikely that she would have climbed 270 steps up a very steep hill to get to her car. Her shoes did not show any signs of rough climbing either. Now consider the men in her life. DeChico, whom Todd had married in 1932 and divorced in 2 years, was a violent thug who frequently beat her. DeChico was also known to be a mob enforcer. There was also her on and off lover, West. He, too, was known to be a jealous and controlling man with a volcanic temper. There was a rumored deathbed confession from him to his friend, actor Chester Morris. There was a rumor that he locked her in the car out of anger, unaware that she would turn the car on to keep warm on the cold December night. That's it. 10 most eerie behind-the-scenes moments from old Hollywood history. Know any other cases that could have made our list? Do share your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button. You also can't miss the video on screen.